1 minute warning. I'd like to call our city council meeting to order on May 22nd, 5:30 p.m. We have all of our council members here with the exception of Chad Lamb, who said he will be just a few minutes late. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Betty Naylor.
Would the audience please stand and give the proper salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you, Betty. We're going to begin with a business item. Adopt Resolution 19-95, consenting to the appointment of Robert Allred as the Information Technology Director of the City of West Jordan, authorizing the mayor to execute an employment agreement and administering the oath of office, and David Bricky.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. It is with a great deal of pleasure that I'd like to introduce and ask for the approval of Robert Allred as our Information Technology Director. Robert joins us from Westminster College, where he both obtained a degree in Bachelor of Science and his MBA. While there, he unified that college in a way unique to that experience. I think Councilman McConaughey can reflect on his personal experience in a positive light. He eventually earned the title also of Provost, so an individual who's built a team network throughout that college, and we expect good things from Mr. Allred.
Thank you. So we'll come to City Council and Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. With a lot of enthusiasm, I'm very excited to make a motion to adopt Resolution 19-95, appointing Robert Allred as Information Technology Director of the City of West Jordan.
Councilmember Burton.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey, a second by Councilmember Burton. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
An emphatic aye.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb. Thanks.
Absent.
Thanks. Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Vote passes 6 in favor.
Thank you. We'll invite the council members to step down and invite Mr. Allred to come up.
And the Constitution of the State of Utah.
And the Constitution of the State of Utah.
And the laws and ordinances of the City of West Jordan.
And the laws and ordinances of the City of West Jordan.
And that I will discharge the duties.
And that I will discharge the duties.
Of my office with fidelity.
Of my office with fidelity.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to citizen comments. And we'll start with those that have signed up. And anyone that wishes to come up after this, we have placed on the podium. If you haven't signed up and you wish to come and speak, please fill out one of these and hand it to the attorney when you finish. But we'll start with Betty Naylor. And remember that you have 3 minutes. Betty?
I think I remember that very well. Mayor and Council, my name is Betty Naylor. I reside at 1229 West, 8450 South, West Jordan, Utah, and have done all my life. Tonight I am standing before you as Vice President of the Salt Lake County Farm Bureau and wishing to invite you to an event that we are having. The event is on June 15th. I have your invitations here. Be sure you read on the back, because if you want to eat with us, you do have to go to the website and order your tickets. Now, the purpose of this event is to show the residents and council members of we're inviting everybody in Salt Lake County as mayor and council members to come, because you know what? Farming still does exist in Salt Lake County. We will be showcasing farming in Salt Lake County, as well as the other aspects of farming, GMOs and so forth. It'll be informational. I know that for me, I will be talking about my Century Farm, meaning that my farm has been under single ownership in the family since 1907 and did qualify for the Century Farm. We are the second owners of that farm since the territory of the United States of America. So it dates back a ways. That will be my main purpose of being there, to talk about the Century Farms. We're also taking our original tractor, which was a Fordson. It's all restored and it runs. And it will be on display there, as well as telling about Century Farms that are here in West Jordan as well as in Salt Lake County. So remember the date. Be sure you look at the back of this. There's the website on there that has how you register for our dinner. And that will start approximately at 5:30-ish. And then we do have a Polynesian show that is coming in about 7 o'clock. This is all pending on when things get going. You know, it's just like farming. You have to do things when we have an opportunity to do things. I thank you, and be sure you see the website to order your tickets, and they'll be available after your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. So is anyone else now that would like to address City Council this evening? Seeing none, I will close citizen comments and move to communications. We'll start with the city manager and staff.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have nothing to add, but we do have Chief Wallentyne on his way to City Hall. He'd like to add something when he gets here, if that's acceptable, if we can hold a slot and time for him once he arrives.
Thank you. We will make an accommodation. So with that, we'll move to consent items, and I have been asked to pull consent item I.
Mayor, what about council comments?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Thank you very much. Council comments. Councilmember Jacob, you're first up.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't want to say this on the motion to approve the contract for Mr. Allred or for Brian that we're going to approve in a minute, but I did want to just mention that I was asked by a resident today why neither of those contracts that we're voting on are available with the agenda. I'm okay voting for it despite the public not having seen it, because these are not offices where council approval is required. The manager can hire these people, both public works and IT directors, with or without council consent. So I'm not too concerned with that, but I just wanted to point out that if we are going to approve contracts and we are going to say publicly that the council is approving contracts, we are voting on behalf of the people that voted for us, or that voted against us. the people we represent. So I would like to have those publicly available for the review, so that if there's areas of concerns and things, I mean, we got them, what, 15 minutes ago, half an hour ago? So I would just like to have those publicly available if we're going to be voting on them. And I think David wants to mention something.
I'll take responsibility for that. We were working on 2 of them, and there were some issues that showed up as recent as this morning. We were trying to get them finalized. We'll link them into the packet so that people who will look at the agenda in the future will see it as if it were there. I apologize to you, the citizens, the council will work on making sure that those are available going forward. But they were issues that needed to be addressed before you were going to vote on them. I'd rather you see one end product than have amended products being brought back and forth.
Sure, and again, I just want to say, I'm still okay with them, because you're free to hire most people without council, advice and consent. So I appreciate that you continually seek for it, however. It's nice to be included in that decision, so I appreciate that. That's all I had.
Councilmember Whitelock.
So one of my comments is kind of on the same vein as Zach's. I too was contacted, and the term was used, golden parachute. It was the term that I was given, and that is the concern. So I have a question that at some point I would like answered. So when we switch to this new form of government, if those payouts are to be paid out, does that have to just come out of the new mayor's budget if they choose to terminate an employee? They'll just have to figure out where they're going to get that money and not ask the taxpayers for more?
No, the next council will have to figure out in that current budget that you're approving shortly, within the next couple months, we'll have to have that payout in there. If you'd like us to calculate what that amount is, which was always the goal, was to allow both the citizens and you as the new council members would be able to identify, if you wanted to have a mayor who came in and did whole-scale changing, what would it cost? So we will plug that number in there if you'd like, but that number would have to come out of the next year's budget.
I think it's a number we need to know about. So yes, I would like that. The other one is the superintendent of Jordan School District is retiring. And did you get a pin?
I got one.
Okay. And they sent some pins back with me for you. They'll be getting a new superintendent next week, and so it's an exciting time for the school district and for us in our city that, it's a new opportunity, and I think it would behoove us to make sure that we have relationships with the new school superintendent. It helps in getting us recognized and giving them good data so they know we need schools. So, thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Bricky, on this contracts, I know with hiring employees, you can't do like drug tests and things like that until they're officially hired. So I was kind of under the idea that we don't see the contract because they have to be approved first and then negotiate the contract. Is that different than, that's, what I'm saying is different than what you had said.
I apologize, I don't understand the question. We try to negotiate the contracts in advance. Is that your question?
That'll answer my question, thank you. It's been a busy couple of weeks since we last talked. I've been in communication with a resident about some trucks on New Bingham Highway, which I've communicated with Brock on that. Also a home-based business issue that I communicated with Brock on. I appreciate, I'd sent some text to Brian on the rain and the state of Salt Lake right now, which is, I think, wetter than Seattle. And he's been able to report to me that areas that I'm concerned about are not flooding, and he actually indicated the whole city has not had any flooding issues. So I'm grateful to him for that. We had sustainability meet last week, and we talked about their presentation that's coming up to the council here in the next, probably within 6 weeks. The Sustainability Committee will give a report. And then this morning, I finally concluded reading all 175 pages of the budget. I had about 20 questions that I emailed Denise, and I sent a carbon copy to you, David, and Corbin. And she was very prompt in her response and very knowledgeable, and I appreciate that. And I'll some of the questions that I do want to talk about from the dais or from the workshop tomorrow, I'll bring up tomorrow. But I'm very pleased with how the budget's been assembled, and I look forward to many good years of budget work going forward. I have a lot of comfort from her answers on questions about revenue streams, and she's very open, honest, and transparent with our funding, and the budget process. So I'm very, very grateful for her hire, and that's what I've been. So I just appreciate the staff being so responsive as I interface with residents. So thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. So as most of you probably know, we just celebrated the sesquicentennial of the Golden Spike. And part of that event included a Golden Spoke, where there was a bicycle ride on the Jordan River Trail all the way that was sponsored by Jordan River Commission and the Wasatch Front Regional Council and some others. And so I took them up on that challenge, and I rode my bicycle from my house, got on the Jordan River Trail at 90th South, and made it all the way to Ogden all in one day. And I took Front Runner back home. Anyway, that was a great experience I got to join with, and our trails are in fantastic shape, by the way, along the Jordan River. So if you haven't been down by the Jordan River lately, you haven't down on the trails. Also, I had an opportunity to attend the celebration for the West Jordan Middle School, with they're getting ready to tear down the old one. So they had an open house over there. And one of the fun residents that I saw there, who happens to be in our audience right here, was Betty Naylor. She was there, and she had some check stubs with her. I was hoping she's going to mention this when she's talking, but she didn't. And these check stubs is when the school district bought that property that West Jordan Middle School is on from her father. And I can't remember the amount. Was it $5,000 something?
$5,400.
54. There we go. So it was 5,000 something. Anyway, so that was pretty impressive. 2 checks for 54. Ah, so it was over 10,000 then for all that property. And it was great seeing the mayor there and several from the school. So they had a wonderful program. Also, last week was National Police Officers Weeks, and I want to join with the rest of our community in showing the appreciation for the fine police officers we have here in the city of West Jordan. So thank you, Chief Wallentyne, and pass that on to your officers, if you would, please. I also got to attend the Association for Municipal Councils, and that was an open discussion about concerns that we are having, and a couple of things that hit the highlight on that other cities are having is trying to keep control and their image and communicate properly on social media. And I think there's some of our council members doing a fantastic job with that. I see them on there every day and leaving comments. I also got to attend Western Growth. Western Growth has a new president there now, which is Don Shelton from South Jordan City Council, who is doing that. He's got some great goals and plans for that, and I think it's going to be a great benefit for our city to continue to participate in the Western Growth Coalition. Let's see. I also got to attend, and I saw Councilman Jacob there with his daughter, an event at Copper Hills High School where the Chamber of Commerce was giving some scholarships away. And there were other organizations giving scholarships as well to our schools, to our students at those schools who got that before they went. I also got to attend the Airport Advisory Board and our events committee. And by the way, the events committee, the next event we have coming up is this Monday, because Monday's Memorial Day. So at 9 o'clock right here at the Veterans Memorial Park, we'll have a celebration for those veterans who have died in the line of duty. And immediately following the ceremony, we will have a hot breakfast, so please come join us Monday at 9 o'clock at Veterans Memorial Park for the event. And that was all I have since those last 2 weeks. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little bit off tonight. As many know, our good city recorder, city clerk Melanie Briggs retired since we last met. And I'm kind of glad she's not here tonight because I'm sure she would punch me. But for the almost 8 years that going on 8 years that I've been on the city council, she was the one person who remained constant, who was always right there, sitting right next to me, who was able to provide so much insight, support. I wanted to just take a minute to recognize the contribution that she made to the city, because over the 33 years that she's been here, she has had a significant impact. And I really don't know that it's possible to help the general public understand how much she has done for them. For us as a council, her contributions were just absolutely immeasurable. I know words aren't going to be adequate at all in describing the appreciation that I have for her. I debated whether I should even try, knowing that those words wouldn't come anywhere near what I intend to convey. But I would just encourage, I really want the citizens of the city to understand how much time and effort and care go into making sure things run smoothly. I want them to know how many people behind the scenes that don't have the spotlight are watching out for their interest and their well-being. Melanie Briggs is one of the rare people that you'll meet that has an intense love for the city and has done so many things to help over the years. I couldn't let today pass without recognizing the immeasurable contribution that she's made. I will miss sitting next to her. It's been a very, very fun time sitting next to her and hearing her thoughts and getting some insights and the help and support she's been. I'm very excited to work with Angie and Jamie a little bit more closely. But I am a little bit off tonight because I miss my friend Melanie. Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you. We'll come back to Chief Wallentyne.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I just want to give a shout out to the people of West Jordan particularly, and I know none of them are here, about the kindergarten, first graders, and second graders of our 8 elementary schools. Police Appreciation Week started off for us last week, and for me it was surprising. I walked in early on Monday and found my downstairs hallway flooded with people about this high. And so if you come over to the police department, you'll notice there's the halls are just lined with notes. We did have to finally get some adults to put them up higher because there were so many, but oh my gosh, that was so fun for me to be with those first graders and kindergartners who were just so full of energy. And we had businesses throughout the week that brought in some treats, and one of our local businesses sponsored a barbecue and asked if they could supply everything, including the staff, to just say thank you. And that was really an amazing show of support. And a few citizens, one called me up and said, "Would you please tell them that I'm an okay person and that the cookies I bake won't have anything bad in them?" And I simply said, "Well, just bring them to my house and I'll check them out first." But and they were good. And I also just wanted to share with the council, I don't know if you saw the news story on Monday evening, but this is such a profound piece of information I think the council must know about. The work of our senior scientists in our West Jordan Police Department Forensics Lab, Francine Bardot. She traveled to Idaho Falls last week and was recognized by the Idaho Falls Police Department. And she had the opportunity to get a hug from a man that she helped free from prison. He was wrongfully convicted of homicide and spent 20 years in the Idaho State Prison. And she was able to use a technique known internationally as the Bardot method to extract DNA from a very tiny piece of evidence. We have a number of pretty high-profile cases that have been solved here in our lab, and it's pretty rare anybody hears about it. More significantly, that tiny piece of DNA that she was able to recover and help free this man was the linchpin in the arrest, and within 24 hours, full confession of a man who had murdered a young woman it was over 20 years ago, in 1996, and Francine was able to sit there with that woman's mother who had become a very dear friend over the years, You know, it's a pretty small piece of information, I realize for you, but, you know, when you realize the impact of one person in our community who, largely because she's so driven, is responsible for what we say all the time. We'd rather see 10 innocent people walk than one, or 10 guilty people walk than one innocent person in prison. And Francine got to talk to us about how that felt to see somebody declared innocent after all those years. So I just want you to know there's some really incredible people across the street and throughout the city, and that's just one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and what a great bit of notoriety for her and the work that she has done over the years for the police department of West Jordan. So thank you. Express our thanks to her as well, if you would. Okay, now we'll move to the consent items, and I've been asked to pull consent item I and L. Councilmember Burton.
I move to approve all consent items as listed, with the exception of I and L.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Burton and a second by Councilmember McConaughey. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Aye.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
And so we'll go to item, was it 6I? Let's do them together. I think we can do them together, 6I and 6L both. Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes, I ask that these be pulled because I feel like not only do we need to be kept appraised of what's going on, I think the public does too, because these both have to do with the Big Bend project that I understand will take a while. So if we could get a little more information before we vote on these two, that would be great. And by little, I mean like, 3-4 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Chuck Tarver is here to give you an update on that project from now to over maybe the next 5 years of where it's headed to. And he understands the short time frame that you're looking for.
Microphone will go off.
Yeah, I was here a couple months ago, gave a pretty good presentation on where we're at tonight, and a couple of grants that you're looking at tonight for on consent or actual approval. One of them is on surplus funds that the state had left over at the end of the year for the $180,000 that we have to expend by June 30th. We've been pretty fully aware of this money coming for the last 6 months. We've been working on it kind of in hopes of actually securing the funding. We found out a few weeks ago, about a month ago, we were going to get the money for the additional $180,000 this year. State's concern was if we could spend the money. I had no concerns or no real issues in thinking that we could get the funds expended by the June 30 deadline. The other grant that you're looking at tonight, the 125, was originally awarded back in July and August of this past year for $113,000. The state had some additional money and bumped it up to our original request of 125. Where we're at today is we had approximately between $1.2 to $1.5 million that available for the first phase of the urban fishery. We received bids the other day on the project. I believe they came in around 833, roughly. Is that the number? So we're substantially below the actual funds that we had available for the first phase to come in and start construction of the pond. We're looking at starting the pond here immediately after Memorial Day. have a substantial amount of work and rock stored at the site by June 30th. Probably the majority of the construction would be completed by the fall, where we'll start putting water in. It'll take about a year for the water to clarify and get to where we can get fish in it. So we're probably looking at about a year and a half to 2 years before we start stocking the pond. Other funding, we have approximately somewhere between $750 to $1.5 million in the works, either obligated from other agencies for the next year to year and a half. We did receive word of funding of $30,000 more to expand our existing project we have going down there. We're looking at receiving another $330,000 from the Watershed Commission, probably within the next 6 to 8 months. So what's going on at Big Bend is starting to snowball. We have the monies to get the urban fishery well underway. We have the additional monies coming in the next year to year and a half to substantially complete a good portion of it. Hopefully within 5 years, I'd like to say would be 100% through, but it is an $8 million project. So within 5 years, we're probably looking at 60% completion out at the site, hopefully more, give or take 10%. Right now, that's kind of where we're at.
Thank you, and thank you for looking for areas that want to contribute to our project and give us funding. That's awesome.
Right. It's, you know, we have a lot of partners in this. We have basically 18 different agencies that are really interested in it. So there's a lot of players in this. It's a lot of staff people here at the city involved with this, working on this. A lot of agencies out there working, a lot of activities with the mayor and some of the council members. So it's just, you know, it's a huge group effort of getting this funding together. And I'm only a small portion of it, of this whole big picture. But yeah, I appreciate coming and answering any questions.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you as well for the work that you've done. I know this has been going on for several years. You've been doing a good job on collecting grants and getting volunteers and finding interns and making a lot of fantastic things happen. And the project's been making progress over the years. The trees have been removed and the weeds have been abated and lots of other things in preparation for this. So I am so excited the earth is going to move and to see this progress happen. And 5 years later, I will be thrilled when it gets done. And that's why I'm saying when people haven't been down the Jordan River Trail lately, they haven't been down to the Jordan River Trail because the changes that have been happening down there and continue to happen. And we're so glad that you've been in this position in order to see this happen and get it through there and get the funding for this so that we didn't have to come up with all these big dollars and the other people helping with this. We just organize it and make it happen. So thank you so much for doing all that. I am really thrilled, and unless you have another question, I was going to go ahead and, so I would like to move that we approve consent items I and L as listed.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Whitelock. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Aye.
Mayor Riding.
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Passes 7 in favor.
Business item 8A, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 19-107, approving a lease agreement between West Jordan Historical Society, Inc., a Utah nonprofit corporation, and the City of West Jordan. David Clements.
Mayor, I'm also going to ask Corbin Lee to participate in the conversation along with Dave Clemens. Thank you.
David should get all the credit for this. He worked very hard on drafting this lease agreement. I want to walk you through a couple of highlights. You have before you tonight a consideration of a lease agreement with the West Jordan Historical Society. If you approve this lease agreement, this is not a fair market lease agreement. So if you approve this, we need to bring it back and have a public hearing as soon as we can notice it to consider the 1082 donation to the lease or the 1082 donation to the museum for not only the value of the lease agreement, but also the value of a grant that has traditionally been given to the museum. That's not for your consideration at this time, but would be for consideration at a future public hearing, if you're comfortable with this lease agreement and we proceed.
So question, are we not voting on the lease agreement tonight then?
No, we want you to vote on the lease agreement, but so we have direction to bring it back for the public hearing. So we need a vote to just know that the council, I want to vote to know the council's comfortable with this, but the actual donation, we need to have the public hearing on it. So the donation of the non-monetary value of the lease and the donation of the cash grant need to be held in the public hearing. So we bring that back. But that has to have a 14-day public notice. And we wanted, at the council's direction, to separate the lease agreement from the grant agreement. That's why you're considering the lease tonight. If you're comfortable with the terms of the lease, then we'll bring the lease back with the public hearing.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know that's a little bit convoluted, but we think that's the best way to dot our I's and cross our T's. Let me walk you through a couple of highlights in this lease agreement. This lease agreement is a renewable lease agreement. It's an initial 2-year term with 2 additional 2-year options. So the maximum length of time this lease agreement could be considered is for up to 6 years if the council determines to continue the lease. In paragraph 8, it spells out the use of this lease. The Museum Society shall operate and maintain the facilities as a museum. They must operate for a minimum of 10 regular recurring hours, which can be determined by the Museum Society, but must be publicly posted and noticed.
And I was assuming that's per week.
Per week, excuse me, 10 hours per week, thank you.
It doesn't say that in the lease agreement, that's
Well,
what I was.
yeah, we'll correct that, thank you. Paragraph 8C, the society must provide the city with quarterly reports. Those quarterly reports must spell out what special occasions have been held at the museum, the number of museum visitors, where the visitors are visiting from, and so on. Paragraph 8D, the society shall document and track and maintain a database of the museum's collection of artifacts, and the museum must maintain a reasonable level of insurance on the collection. Paragraph 8E, the society shall create and maintain a website. The society must post the museum events and operation information on their website and publicly advertise the museum activities. The city will reasonably work to support this society on their marketing efforts, but the society must also go out and actively promote the museum to K through 12 schools in West Jordan, Boy Scout Troops of America, troops and charters, and so on. In paragraph 10, the society shall at its own expense maintain the facilities in a clean and sanitary manner. But the city shall at its own expense perform or cause to be performed limited maintenance and repairs on the property, such as irrigation and landscape maintenance. The city shall have the right to repair or maintain or cause the museum to maintain the facilities if there's any unsafe or dangerous conditions. Paragraph 11, the property shall at all times be held in the name of the city. The society may remove or relocate the facilities at the end of the lease, but if the lease terminates, the facilities are in the name of the city. Paragraph 16, the society must install new signage along 7800 South, which includes the days and hours of operation, as well as a phone number and a website address, so the society can be reached for special appointments. Paragraph 17, subparagraph A. The society shall maintain its 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit status. Paragraph B. The society shall seek annual funding and revenue from sources other than the city. The remainder of the paragraph spells out the society's insurance and indemnification requirements and does not allow sublessees and so on. But I wanted to just highlight specifically those specific terms, as those have been the terms that have been at issue primarily with this lease agreement.
Some questions from council, starting with Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Corbin, has the society received a copy of this contract?
I don't think they've received a copy of this very latest contract, no. They've been in touch a little bit with us heavily initially. We tried to take their concerns, we tried to take the council's concerns and draft this, but they have not received this latest version of this, no.
So before we discuss this in detail and vote on it, wouldn't it be good to have them involved in this last copy or revision?
Sure, I'd like that. If they want to delay, it's my understanding that they want to proceed as quickly as possible. So we can, now I take blame on that we have not had as many conversations with the museum as we needed to here to this latest. I'm happy to delay this, but I know it's also in the museum's interest to move this forward as quickly as possible. I believe this captures their interests primarily, but we're happy to delay that if you want, and we can have conversations with the museum. But I think it's their interest to move this forward.
Yeah, and delaying is a concern. I understand they've already canceled some events, and there's been over $1,000 the refunds they've had to provide back due to events canceled. It's not doing that. Would it be possible that we could, until we get this contract approved by both parties and signed, that we could revert back to the pre-contract we had before and continue to do that until this gets signed, so they can open their doors and continue to function until this contract gets created and signed?
Their previous contract has expired, so, I mean, it is fully expired. So I think the quickest course of action is to move forward on this one. Now, again, we still need to have a public hearing regarding the donation aspect of this lease agreement. So frankly, I'd like direction from the council regarding these terms. It was my understanding last time we met with the museum that the things that were deal breakers for them are covered in here.
Okay, as I look over this, I think there are still some deal breakers in here that need to be addressed, which is why I'm concerned that we're discussing this without them being present. And I don't know if they were notified that we are holding this today. Do you know if that
I don't
notification
know.
went to them?
No.
Okay. And I'm also concerned that we didn't give them the grant for last year for the work that they performed last year. And so far this year that they haven't been able to open their doors because we don't have a contract signed. And I'm just thinking if we can live off the existing one and just give it an continuing date until we are able to do another one, so they can open their doors tomorrow and resume, and then we could work the financial part and the other parts out from that point. As for discussing the parts of this, we could do that, but I would not be willing to vote on anything on this without having an opportunity for them to review it first.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. One quick thing in the lease on that paragraph 17, B is in Bravo. It starts with notwithstanding the provisions of paragraph 2 herein, and I'm trying to figure out how that's related, because that talks about the lease term and the number of days. I'm trying to figure out why that is notwithstanding when it comes to seeking other funding outside of, what does the one have to do with the other? Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're correct. I'm not sure if those are related.
Okay, so that line probably needs to be either that first part of 17B should probably be stricken, unless there's another part of this that should refer to, in which case it should be changed. But much like Councilmember Burton, I actually have different reasons. I'm not willing to vote on the resolution tonight either, mainly because the resolution says, whereas the West Jordan City Council, or whereas the city has held a public hearing pursuant to Utah code. We haven't.
Correct. This is
So-
not a public hearing.
I'm not gonna vote on a resolution that says we did if we didn't, as one of the whereases. And the second part of that needs to just be fixed. It says a waiver in the amount of $4,600 per month for the term of the lease agreement totaling $4,600. So unless it's a 1-month lease agreement, that needs to be changed as well. But again, I'm not going to be willing to vote on, I'm happy to give you direction to say, yes, let's give direction to staff to proceed with the lease agreement and go to the society and get their buy-off on it and sign all the papers and dots the i's and the t's and then bring it back and we'll do the public hearing and then we'll vote on that. I'm good with that. I'm good with giving direction. I am not good with voting on the resolution that's in here because it says we did something we didn't do.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. There's been a lot of great dialogue from my colleagues. I am concerned on just some of the verbiage that's in this, but I really want to strive to get us back to, there's a system and a process on how we do things. And I know that the museum has been percolating as we try and come to some terms, but I would feel better if we just do a process like we would do with any entity that we're entering into a contract, that if we're doing a lease and public hearing, we just go through that process. And like Councilmember Jacob said, I think I'm okay giving direction to move forward. I'm not comfortable doing this resolution tonight for those reasons. I mean, one example is it had in there, I just noticed, the Boy Scouts of America, and it's, I think, Scouts BSA or something like that, or just still Boy Scout, okay. Anyway, I'm fine moving direction forward, but the whole time I've been here, we need to just follow the process. There's a system in place, we check off the box, we have the public hearing, we bring it to a vote, we have the dialogue. To me, this isn't the warmest agreement. I still have a preference for more hours. I received an email I was trying to find here in the last couple of days about a museum that was inviting me to come and see them. They're open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 8 hours each day. I get 24 hours a week that I can go see this museum. I'm trying to remember what the museum was. That's why I was looking for the email, but I think we can do more. We've had dialogue. I don't want to belabor it up here. But that's kind of where, those are my thoughts right now, is we just follow the process. We have a system in place. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I had some of the same things that Councilmember Jacobs, the dollar amount was one of them. A lot of this I'm okay with. I mean, I think we already worked on the hours for a long time. I'm with Councilmember Burton that I'd like to see it done as soon as possible. I'm not sure that I'm willing to do it without a lease agreement because I think that sets us up for some liability issues that I don't want to take the risk of something occurring and us not having an agreement. So I also don't feel comfortable voting on this because of some of the verbiage tonight, but would love to see it come back ASAP.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any material concern with what's been presented. I'm okay with the flexibility. I know there have been conversations back and forth with the museum about, okay, hours, posting signs, things like that. I don't have any significant concerns about what's here other than, I mean, there's been some comments about wordsmithing that have been shared. I'm sure that can be worked out. But in the material aspect, I really don't have any concerns with what's been presented. What I'm looking for is something that we can take and show to the citizens saying, if as a city, we're contributing the equivalent of $4,600 a month of taxpayer money. Here's what the residents are getting in return. So I really like having all of that clearly spelled out here, saying this is exactly what we get. We know we're going to get this many hours, very similar to what we do with service in lieu of fees, where they're saying these are the hours that we're going to provide, and this is the service that the city gets in return. I like that we have that here so that we can quantify the benefit of the museum to the residents. I like the directions it's going. I wish that they would have been here to be able to speak about it and hear any concerns that they may have. But again, I like the direction we're going. My primary concern is making sure that we can articulate to the residents the value that we're getting for the city's contribution. I think this is the right direction. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I am ready to make a motion. I move that we permit the society to operate the museum according to the parameters of the pre-existing contract up through and until June, what's our date, June 15th? Is that our next council meeting? June 12th, where we will review a contract to continue from that point forward.
Motion fails for a second. Councilmember Jacob.
I'll take a stab. I move to direct staff to proceed with finalizing the lease with the society, scheduling the public hearing, and bringing it back for approval when all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I wanted to second it, but I think we need to give a date, not just an open-ended. Can we give it a date?
I'll amend that to say by the next council, by 2 council meetings?
Please.
Within the next 2 regularly scheduled council meetings, June 26th.
Then I'll second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Jacob, a second by Councilmember Whitelock. Discussion to the motion, Councilmember Burton.
I would like to see a provision in there that can go ahead and get open and start doing it. Is there a way you want to include that in your motion somehow?
No, I'd rather just have that separate, that be a separate discussion.
Seeing no further discussion, let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock,
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson,
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey, Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb,
Yes.
Mayor Riding,
Yes.
Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Passes 7 in favor.
Did that give you the direction then, Corbin, that you needed?
Yes, what I took from that is we will come back, well, if it's okay with council, what I understand from the vote was that we will have a public hearing on the second council meeting in June. That public hearing can include the value of the lease agreement, the value of the grant directly. We will clean up the resolution. We'll make some minor corrections to the lease, but the general meat of the lease will present at that meeting in more or less in this form as you have it tonight.
Okay. Thank you. We will now move to item 9, the workshop. 9A is discussion and direction to staff from council regarding HB 119 pertaining to referenda, Rob Wall. And I would, since this is now a workshop session, we'll open up all the microphones so people can jump in and question as Rob goes along.
Thank you, Mayor. While Scott's loading this for me, in the spirit of Councilmember Anderson's desire and admonition, the city manager and I decided that that it would be prudent to share with you, and I will call it an opportunity, that you have as a council. Boy, that's not really, can get the lights down just a little bit so you can see that a little better? Or can you see that okay on your monitors? Okay, okay. Oh, yeah, that does show up better. Relative to referendum, as you know, in the last legislative session, the legislature approved a new process and regulations, parameters for what's called citizen-initiated legislation, or citizen legislation. And I wanted to just give a real quick overview of what that was about. And this is going to be very general to get you to the point to where you can, if you want to talk about this tonight, that's great. If you want to think about it, we can come back and talk about it later. So that's what I'm going to do here. A couple of weeks ago, or about a week ago, I guess, I sent you some materials that I received in a discussion, a workshop discussion group that I participated in that reviewed the new legislation and talked about some very fundamental best practices on the ground operation issues as relate to referenda and citizen initiative. I don't know if you have a chance to read that. There was one part of it that had something like a 114-page law review type article in it. I haven't even read that yet. There was a really good, well-written 12-page summary on the difference between, on the referendum process here in Utah. There was also a good flow chart that outlined, I thought, quite well the way the process works. So I would encourage you to take a look at that as you mull this all over in your mind. So let me just start with this first slide. Article 6, Section 1 of the Utah Constitution says that the legislative power of the state is vested in two groups. One of them is the state legislature, and the other one is the people. That is the article from which this whole idea of citizen-initiated legislation comes. A subsequent paragraph there says, the legal voters of any city or county, city, or town in the numbers, under the conditions, in the manner, and within the time provided that by statute may initiate any designated legislation and cause it to be submitted to the people of the city for adoption upon a majority vote of those voting on the legislation as provided by statute. That's citizen-initiated legislation. In other words, the citizens come up with an idea and they write the law and they put it on the ballot. The other way that the people, we the people of the state, have the opportunity to legislate is the following paragraph in the same article and section. We may also require any law ordinance passed by the lawmaking body of the city to be submitted to the voters. That's referendum. That's where you pass a law and the voters put that on the ballot. So that's where this whole thing comes from. And the important thing to remember in this, as you think about this, is that the Supreme Court of Utah is very dedicated to the idea that there are two co-equal legislative bodies. And I'm not here to advocate one way or the other what they think. I'm just here to explain to you, they feel very strongly that the citizens of West Jordan have the same legislative power as the 7 of you do. Now that's an interesting thought to think about, and I don't want to get into a big philosophical discussion because that's not my role as your legal counsel. And frankly, I know that there, if not all of you, some of you have thought about this a lot for a long time, and probably a lot about it before you ever ran for office. So I'm not standing here as an expert on the philosophy of this, but I do want you to understand that our Supreme Court is very committed to that idea. It's interesting because we live in a representative democracy form of federal government with the idea, if you go back and read the many treatises that have been written through the ages on this form of government, the idea is that the 7 of you are elected to make decisions. It's not a democracy where we count how many want out in the citizens, the city want something to happen. You get to decide that. But we have this check and balance, I guess you could call it, that even when you do exercise your representative authority, voters who elected you to do that can say, well, yeah, but on this one, we want to do it ourselves. So that's just kind of a philosophical thing that it is what it is. Okay, what is clear in Utah when it comes to referendum? I want you to understand what our Supreme Court has said, because Referenda is a different animal depending on which state you live in. It is very, very different from state to state. And I know that, I remember in high school, I had a social studies class where we talked about this. I remember nothing about it, except I do remember it was very general, and we never opened the Utah Code, and we never read a Supreme Court case. Now, that's probably because our instructor was wise enough to know that it would put a bunch of seniors in high school to sleep. But it is very unique as you go to state. So let me just throw out a couple of things that we do know here in Utah. First of all, our Supreme Court is going to continue to zealously protect the people as a co-equal legislative body. Second, the Utah legislature will retain its obligation and its right to determine the process. And the reason that I can say that to you is that it's in the Constitution. And it is very difficult to amend the Constitution. So I can, with a fair amount of confidence, tell you that at least this part is well settled in Utah. The other thing that I can tell you, because of a presentation I heard from a former Supreme Court justice a few years ago at a city attorney's conference, who stood in front of all of us, and in a very paternalistic way, but a loving way. He was a great judge. I really liked him. But he was making it clear that we were local government lawyers, and that's all we were. And he wanted us to understand that the Supreme Court is not going to let the citizens' right to petition go away. And it didn't matter how we argued in favor of that for our clients, it was not going to happen, so just don't go down that path. And I can tell you most of my colleagues were happy with that, because that's not our role, and it's not really something city attorneys like to get involved in. What else is clear? The Supreme Court has made it clear that legislative decisions are referable, and administrative decisions are not. That's clear. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, a little more. They've also made it clear that actions in the form of government that you will all be operating under come January 6th are all legislative if they're city council actions. Now, that's a good thing and that's a bad thing. In my view, as a lawyer representing a city council, it's a good thing in that in a council mayor form of government, you can be confident that there's never going to be a debate about whether you're a legislator or an administrator. That's an advantage, because as a legislator, you have really broad discretion in the basis upon what you make your decisions.
Rob, is that not clear under the current form of government as well? I mean, we are a legislative body. We are not an administrative body in any way.
It's not clear.
Really?
It is not clear. It's very unclear. And in fact, you have legislative and administrative powers right now.
In that case, never mind.
And that's what makes this complicated, more complicated, under the current form of government and under the 5- and 6-member council forms. The downside to that is, as a council and as a staff, when the new form of government begins, there are a number of activities that we're going to have to take a very close look at if we want to protect your decision-making from a referendum. Because everything you do is referable. Now, there's some ways to deal with that, and I'm not saying there's ways around the citizen's right to refer. I'm saying you're elected to make decisions, and you want to preserve as much of that authority as you can. Let me go on, and maybe it'll clarify a little bit more. Your question, council member, is a very good one, and in fact, we as residents of Utah over the last 20 years particularly have paid a lot of money to a lot of lawyers to argue about this at the Supreme Court. So it's a very good fundamental question. Finally, what else is clear? Local legislative decisions are referable. Local administrative decisions are not. Actions by legislative bodies in the new form of government are always legislative. I already talked a little bit about that. What's not clear? And then we're going to get to what I'm proposing for you. What is legislative and administrative in every form of government other than the council mayor form? And even with a series of Supreme Court cases that have been decided in the last decade, it's really not clear. I'll give you an example. If we do know that a budget decision is a legislative decision, and that's because it affects the entire population, is a broad policy decision. And those are two really fundamental key issues when it comes to citizen initiative or citizen-initiated legislation. What is administrative, if, for example, using the budget, is that once you, for example, approve a line item that says $500,000 for salt, the executive can then carry that out without coming back to you, except for you also have the authority to say, okay, in our finance policies, if you spend more than 100,000 of that, we do want you to come back. But that, again, is an administrative decision, even though you're a legislative body, because now you're acting upon a policy that you put in place initially, the budget. So you find yourselves acting as a legislative and an administrative body. The decision to put $500,000 in the line item is referable. The decision to tell the city manager to come back to you if he spends over 100, that's not referable, because that's an administrative decision. What also is not clear is what are the bounds of the state legislative process. In HB 119, the legislature's decided several things. We're going to talk about 3 of them here in just a minute. One of the things they have not decided, and I don't think it's lawful in Utah, and I'll be surprised if the legislature ever goes this far, is whether or not a proponent of a referendum can hire signature gatherers. And as you know, one of the most controversial parts of these referendum is gatherers that go door to door that are paid by companies that hire them to do that. And for example, in 3 of the most recent referenda that occurred here in Utah, one of the signature gathering companies charged $11 a signature to those promoting the referendum. Another one charged $7, and another one charged $4. There are 3 businesses in Utah now that have created a cottage industry. It's a little more new to Utah than it is other states, but all they do is gather signatures, and they make a lot of money. There are some states that have outlawed that type of business. Personally, I have a little bit of problem with that as it relates to the First Amendment, but I'm not the Supreme Court and I'm not a legislator. But that's something that our legislature has not chosen to do yet. I don't know, I have my own opinion about what I think the Supreme Court would do with that, but I'm not going to give you my opinion because it's only based on speculation. Another process issue. Up until now, in Utah, the standard was for a referendum in a city that the gatherers had to collect a certain percentage of signatures depending on the number of voters that voted in a prior presidential election throughout the whole city. The legislature's now changed that to where there are what we call voter participation areas. And the gatherers have to collect a percentage of signatures from each of those participation areas. What that's called is geographic diversity. And of course, then the big question is whether or not the Supreme Court will uphold HB 119 over the next few years as cities now implement these new regulations. So what is meant by the bounds? There's 3 things. One is geographic diversity, the bounds of what the legislature can do. How far can they dictate what the size of these voting areas have to be? And if you think about this philosophically, if you wanted to stop all referenda, you could do it very easily. And what you do is create 30 voting districts in West Jordan, and you'd say that every district had to have 90% of the voters sign the petition. You'd never have a referendum that wins. Another question is signature gathering regulations. I talked about that one just a minute ago. The number of signatures required, the time for submitting, removing, or verifying the signatures, and finally, are there restrictions on paid signature gatherers? The bounds of what the legislature may or may not be able to do also includes the extent to which you can use public funds to educate voters. One of the most controversial issues so far, you seven vote on a piece of legislation here locally, it's referred, you can't say anything about it after that. And yet those who are promoting the legislation can spend any amount of money they want to explain from their perspective what you did, but you don't have an opportunity to explain why you did it once that petition is filed, the signature gathering petition is presented to the city recorder. So why am I spending all your time with this? Well, here's why. Here's the new standard in Utah. For a referendum to be successfully, signature, to be placed on a ballot, there now has to be 15% of two things. Number one, 15% of the number of acting voters in at least 75% of the city's voting participation areas, and 15% of the total number of active voters in the city. That's the new signature gathering standard. What is a voter participation area? It's designated in the law as 8 contiguous and compact areas of substantially equal populations. That is not one vote, one vote. That is not one man, one vote. That's a different standard. This is compact and contiguous. It's a much looser standard. What are active voters? Well, that's a lot easier now. Instead of looking to the past presidential election, the county clerk looks to the number of those who were registered January 1 preceding when the referendum starts.
So it's not active voters anymore, it's just registered voters?
Registered voters.
Active or otherwise?
Yeah, that's how they're defining it.
Wow.
Right, not those who voted, but those who register. So here's the question before you. And again, we can spend a little time if you want to talk about this. If you want to mull it over and then come back and debate it again, we can do that. In the end, we are going to need, David's going to need some direction from you as to how we deal with these two options. Number one, the law says you have to designate 8 voter participation areas because of the size of the city, population of 100,000 or over. So you've got to divide the city into 8 areas. You have to do that by January 1st of next year. Or, if you prefer to just use the 4 voting districts you already have, there is that exception in the law. You can choose. I want to throw out 2 things for you to consider, however. The legislature decided 8 was the proper number. The reason this exception came into play for those cities that have voting districts is that there may be referenda that are filed before January 1 of next year when you have to have the districts designated, the VPAs designated. They call them VPAs, voter participation areas. So if one comes here before that, we can use the council districts, and it's from each of those that 15% of the votes have to be collected. The other thing to think about is that the city has a number of issues right now. One of them is a land use issue that's already in the process. But there are other land use issues coming, as well as other non-land use issues that you may need to deal with in a referenda over the next 6 months and after. You need to ask yourselves, is the geographic diversity that you desire as a group enough with 4 districts, or do you think there ought to be 8, which is the state standard for everyone else? And when I say everyone else, those that don't have council voting districts. How did they come up with 8? It's an arbitrary number. They had to come up with something. There was a lot of debate back and forth. Cities of 10,000 versus cities of 120,000. How do you come up with the number that works? The principle they base this geographic diversity upon, and this is consistent through the United States, and this is where Utah is a real outlier, is that for a state referendum, there has to be a percentage of voters from each of the 29 counties. So statewide referenda really takes the pulse of the state of Utah, whereas current referenda law allows a very small minority of a city to overrule the will of all the elected officials that represent all of the city. The idea of dividing into districts forces this idea of geographic diversity so that the referenda effort cannot hijack unreasonably your decision-making. So that's the question. Do you want to use the 4 council districts, or do you want to divide them into 8? You don't have any options in between. It has to be 4 or 8. You have to do it by January 1st. You may want to do it now, because if you don't make the decision now and we do have a referendum come in, the default is the 4 districts. So that's what I wanted to put before you.
Since we're workshop, can I just jump in? Is there a differing degree of difficulty or a required staff effort between 4 and 8? Is there any substantial difference in what it takes from our staff to figure that out?
Very good question, and it took a lot of time debated on the Hill. The only, right now, well, every 10 years, this VPA designation has to occur again after the census. So we're going to be here again next year. Every city will after we have the new census numbers. The only condition is whatever lines you draw, they have to follow the precinct boundaries. We've already had the recorder and one of the attorneys in our office look at this with the county, and it will not be difficult to draw 8. And they've actually already done calculations based on the current population numbers, so that the proposed 8, and honestly what they've done is just taken the 4 and gone like this, as best they could, following precinct boundaries. And I think they do meet the law as compact and contiguous. Now that doesn't mean you don't have some options, and if you decided you wanted to look at the 8 idea, you don't have to go with the way the recorder and the attorney so far has done it. That's just kind of a starting point for discussion. What they don't want to have happen is gerrymandering, where you have voting district or VPAs like this based upon based upon a population you think will or will not participate in a referendum.
So historically, when we've had like the clerk go through and look at the map and say, okay, here's how many population we have in each of our precincts, therefore based on this we're going to divide out, here's voting district 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
The council really hasn't got too involved other than that, so I personally would prefer the council stay out of the minutia of it and just say 4 or 8. And
Yeah.
if it's just as easy, I would rather personally go with 8 if that's the intent of the law and we've already got it. It's not any substantial level of effort. I would just say 8.
And if I could add one more thing, Councilmember McConaughey, the reason they were able to do it rather quickly, and I don't want to, well, Duncan's not here, but Jamie, you can comment. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it was relatively easy compared to doing council districts, is because with the council districts, there's a string of cases from the U.S. Supreme Court relative to the one man, one vote concept, where you have to achieve certain percentages. With this, we don't have to. We just have to show that they're compact and contiguous, so it's a lot easier to draw those lines.
No, I was going to just mention, I appreciate the thought on the census. That was going to be my question, that we'd have to do this. But if I'm understanding what you're saying, we probably ought to adopt something for the remainder of this year in case something comes up this year, and then in January, adopt something that would last for a year until the census comes out, and then adopt something that would be good for 10 years. Is that what I'm understanding?
I don't, unless you want to revisit it in January, because you didn't like the way it shook out, you wouldn't have to do anything again in January because you've already done it now. You just have to do it once before January. But then when the new census numbers are out, the HB 119 requires it to happen again and every 10 years thereafter. The reason that I'm suggesting that you may want to think about formalizing it now, whether you formalize it in 4 or 8, is if you have an inclination to want to look at 8, we probably should do that now, because the default is 4 if an application hits before you affirmatively designate what you want the areas to be.
Well, and I think I agree with Councilmember McConaughey. I think 8 is a good number, because I worry if we just keep it in districts, and I also agree that I don't think we need to get as a council into the minutia, but I worry that there's kind of a east side of the city, west side of the city, and with the 4 districts, we can kind of pit residents against residents, which I don't know that I prefer. I would like us to be more of a single West Jordan when it's coming to these type of issues. That we're, hearing a balanced voice. So, but I do agree with Councilmember McConaughey that I think 8's a good number. So, thank you.
If you want to speak, just jump in.
So I like 8 as well, but I want to see what 8's the staff draws up before I say yes to it, because
Fair enough.
I guess I do want to get into the minutia. I think it's my job as the voice of the people to see what staff are doing and say yes or no to that. Thanks.
So would you have to bring this back as a resolution with a map?
Yeah,
showing-
Mayor, if you want us to consider what I would recommend is that you direct David to direct us to bring back a proposal for you to look at with a map, with a table of the number of voters, so that you can see both numerically and geographically how it would shake out. And we can prepare a resolution to bring to you then. If you like the way it's drawn, great. If not, we can bring it back again. But we would bring to you a proposal to start with, list of numbers, and then a resolution, and then you can take it from there.
I would like to see 8 as well. I would also like to delve into the minutia a little bit for the same reasons that Councilmember Whitlock mentioned. And the captain has turned on the fasten your seatbelt signs. If you'll please return to your seat. There he
Okay.
goes again. Just kidding, Rob, not you. But yeah, I like the idea of 8 as well. I'd like to see where those lines get drawn and how they get drawn. I like the idea of the diversity. There wasn't more to your presentation, was there? Because we just kind of started jumping in with comments, and I wasn't sure you were
No,
done.
I have, you know
that the
me,
last
I
slide?
can talk for hours if you want me to. I wanted to keep this very short to just give you the context of this one decision that you ought to be thinking about.
Yeah, I'm all for 8 as well. One question, if it is 4, the law said something about 75% of the 8. Is it 75% of the 4
Yes,
as well? So it would be,
thank you. If I
would be
misstated
3 out
that,
of the
I'm
4
sorry.
districts, okay.
It's 75% of the VPAs,
However we decide to
however
define
many
that.
you decide.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
4 or 8, yeah.
Yeah.
Not 22, because that would be hard.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Well, I think that's good direction for our city manager then, is to have this come back on a resolution with a map showing how that city would divide it up into 8 areas.
Is there a time frame that the council would like to see this back by?
Two meetings a month from now?
My preference is to get the budget done, but to have you talk about it. We've actually, Duncan Murray has actually prepared a couple different variations, either a split of 8 districts with 2 districts within each of the existing districts, trying to keep that population a certain way. How about if I send it to you all in something that you can at least look at before we bring it back? And we will shoot for end of August.
Okay, sure.
No problems with the end of August, it sounds like, so.
Did I hear 1st of August? Is that what you wanted?
No, end of August would be fine. Second meeting in August. Are everybody okay with second meeting in August?
Yeah.
Did you say there are already referendums coming our way?
No, there's one issue, there's one land use application. It's the Upper Mountain Resort.
That you think might?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so my thinking on that is that it's not gonna come before you for a while. But once it does, that's when there might be a possibility. It's these, as you know, these land use issues that have been the focus over the last 5 or 6
And
years with
so if we
cities.
haven't made a decision by then, it will be 4.
Then it's 4, yeah.
So I'd be okay to see it earlier even.
Okay, well, and maybe we can look at that, see what the workload is, and I think the idea of sending out some proposals to you to look at, you can shoot some comments back, and we can maybe come with 2 or 3 different ideas based on how you view them. But of course, obviously, we'll have the discussion in open meeting and make the decision for the public to see and hear.
Jump in there.
No question regarding this one. Regarding the next agenda item, my thought was going to be if that's going to be something that takes more than 10, 15 minutes, perhaps a motion for a break would be appropriate before starting.
Let me just make sure we're through at this item. Okay.
I'm finished.
We are through with this item, and we have a suggestion that we take a 10-minute break.
I guess the question is, how long do we anticipate the next item is going to be?
Scott, any idea?
It's an update and discussion on some of the changes. It could take more than 15 minutes.
All right, move for a 10-minute recess.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So 6:55 to 7:05. 1 minute. We'll reconvene City Council and we'll go to workshop item 9B, discussion and update regarding Okra Mountain Resort. Scott Langford.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council. I wish Betty Naylor was still here because she, as a long-term farmer, could testify to the fact that you need water to grow things, whether it's crops or homes to come out of the ground, you need water. And that's the basis of why we're here to give the council an update tonight. We've been working on the finer details of this development for a number of months. We're close, and we're here to field questions, but generally just to give you an update. So I'm going to jump ahead a few slides and then come back. We've got Ray McCandless here as well to get if you have any specific questions, and of course Mr. Kent Hogan and his design professionals are here representing the development. But this map should be somewhat familiar to the council. It's the west side of West Jordan. We've got zones. These are water pressure zones, zones 4 through 7. The Okra Mountain Resort property, the 220 acres approximately, lies right here. So in zone water pressure zone 5. The city has a plan to facilitate further growth in the zone 5 and zone 6, but that plan takes time to roll out. And in working with this particular development, we're talking about accelerating the implementation of the infrastructure needed for a new water tank, transmission lines, etc. And those are the details that are being worked on right now with city staff and the developer. And we can get into some of those details as needs be. Thank you. So let me go back. Since it's been a number of months since the council has seen this plan, I believe it was January or February last time you saw this, but the general consensus from at least from staff's perspective is that this is a fairly favorable development proposal with a lot of mixture of uses. During the initial reviews, the council listed a few questions or concerns, and since we've had time since the last time we've talked about this, we wanted to give you an update on how some of those questions or concerns have been addressed, and how some of the things have evolved over time. So, Ray, are you prepared to talk about the changes, or would that be? This is again is a workshop.
It's a workshop, so it's open. Mike's here.
Is the council interested on some of the changes? They're not major changes, but we can talk about some of the tweaks. You know, some of the lot sizes have gone up, and those details like that.
I would think, since that we last heard it a few months ago, it would be good just for the public record and for us to just refresh our memories on what the modifications were.
Sure, the general scope. And,
yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll turn the time over to Ray for that.
Interesting note, too, that the school has started.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, the Jordan School District has broken ground on this elementary school right here.
Yeah, it'd be good to not only know what is new, but also kind of a refresher on what is old. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council.
when we brought this back, or brought this to you, and this was the rezoning and the future land use map amendment, we had submitted to you as part of that, just a concept development plan. There was also a preliminary development plan. We held a public hearing on that. But in order to work out the details with relation to the water and some other things, that's kind of why it's taken so long to do that, to work through the issues in the development agreement. So when we went through the planning, or at the public hearing, there were a couple of things, or a number of things. I don't know if you received just the list of items that you were looking at the last time. But if not, we'll include those with our staff report, and I'll go over a couple of those with you this evening. So one of the things that you had asked about was just the number of lots over 12,000 square feet. I think you were looking at increasing the number of those lots. With the original, or the concept development plan, it showed 13 lots, and then it's been revised now to show 25 lots that are over 12,000 square feet. So that will be that's in the latest edition of the development plan, and then it's also in the current draft of it's also in the development plan. So the other thing that you were looking at is just the number of lots between 6,000 and 7,000 square feet really ought to be reduced without compromising the amount of open space that was proposed. They went back, the applicant went back and then has changed that. There's 166, the original plan showed 166 lots. That's been reduced to 155 lots. The number, or the amount of open space hasn't changed. It's still right at, it only decreases the number of acres of open space by 1.3 acres. So it's still well over that 15% minimum open space requirement in that PC zoning district. We talked about some other minor things. It was one of those things was just to bring increase the depth of the driveways on the lot from 18 feet to 22 feet. We haven't seen that in the revised development plan, but it's still going to be a recommendation of ours when it finally gets to the city council. There are some other things that we're working through, and that's still as part of the development agreement, improvement agreement, and those are the 80th South and 90th South street improvements. The other, let's see, the other thing was that the development agreement really ought to define what recreational amenities that there are, and that development plan is being updated to include those recreational amenities, and then who's responsible for maintenance and ownership of those. One of the other things was making sure that the area along Barney's Wash, which is the area that's just right through the center of it, running east and west, is developed, and in the development agreement it does show like a 40% that the maximum amount of native vegetation can't exceed 40%. So let's see, yeah, the other issue was the water tank, and then timing on the installation of the amenities.
I guess my only request is, can we use quotation marks when we say native vegetation?
We can.
Thank you.
The overall number of dwelling units, I think, is pretty similar. I've got that here. It's dropped by, okay, thank you. Dropped by 3 units. The overall layout is fairly similar. There's not a lot of change there. There's still oh, that's right. In the original development, or in the original concept development plan, they showed market rate condominiums, and then also some senior housing, but the market rate condominiums have gone away. It's now all the multifamily is now going to be senior housing. And aside from that, you know, I don't know of any other significant changes, so
About the phasing plan.
I guess there are. There, I got it, thanks. So this was, yeah, Scott was mentioning that we do have the phasing plan here. This was what was originally submitted. As you can see, the lion's share of the recreational amenities were included as part of phase one. And that has since changed. This is the latest phasing plan. As you'll notice, it's the first phase has been divided up into a couple of different phases, phases 1A and 1B. And I think part of the reason for that is to be able to develop these lots and sell them out in order to help offset the costs of installing those recreational amenities. So was there anything else?
Pretty much covers it, so. And the developer is here, and I don't want to speak for him, he can jump in here, but there is a significant cost associated with this development. And I'm talking not just about water, but if you were to drive out there today, you've got 6400 West, which is installed. But in order to really move forward, the main access to this development, again, phase one, comes off of 90th South. That's an arterial road. Now, we're not requiring a full build-out, full width. We have provisions in our code which allow the city council to approve less than a full width road. And so, but it still needs to be functional from 64th West all the way out to U-111. UDOT has not allowed any access from this state road into the development. So the main point of access comes off of the future 90th South. In addition, you've got 8600 South, which is a collector road. 6700 West is a collector road. And both of these are 70-foot wide roads. All of that costs a significant amount of money. And so, as explained to staff, the reason why they updated their phasing plan to phase 1A, 1B as a proposal is to help offset some of that initial high cost to get access to the development. In addition to that, I don't know, Mayor, or I guess members of the council, if you have any questions about the water and the timing, we can get into that if needs be.
Yeah, no question on the water, but I'm thinking forward 20, 30 years, what is U-111 going to look like? And are we going to look back at this moment and say, yeah, absolutely, we kept enough open space for an interchange or whatever was going to happen there? I know that 90th changes a little bit at this portion, but do we have enough open space reserved for future growth at 90th and U-111?
Yeah, about, I think it was last month, the council, by resolution, approved an agreement between the city and UDOT, just an acknowledgement of the intersection spacing along U-111 and our major arterials. In that agreement, UDOT kind of tipped their hand and showed us, that the city, what they anticipate U-111 corridor looking like. Essentially, it's a 7-lane road right now. That's on the UDOT's plans. Now, the great thing about some of the collaborative efforts that West Jordan is undertaking with our other cities in the southwest quadrant of the county is that we're looking at U-111 and asking the question, well, is that sufficient? Is a 7-lane, Redwood Road West going to be sufficient for all the growth planned? So we're going to be raising that question, and hopefully we can get some clarification. Right now, the right-of-way on U-111 in West Jordan is about 125 feet wide. It goes wider than that in some locations. So that's sufficient for what UDOT has on their plans, but is that long-term going to work? I don't know.
Just wanted to surface it, and I'm glad it's been brought up. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I do remember that discussion, but I don't think we took any action on it. I think it was just information that we were receiving on U-111 that UDOT had planned limited accesses and moving a couple of those that we may or may not want to do in the future. But anyway, that's not why he just derailed me. So if I may, couple of questions on the townhomes. What is the advantage or disadvantage? Why are we switching the townhomes to all senior housing? Is that better? Is that worse? What's the advantage of doing that?
I'll have to defer to Greg Haas.
This has been a long process. I really appreciate everything that staff has done to help us get to this point. But to answer your question, the decision to take and put all the condominiums in the very high density category, and there's been a lot of conversations between us and staff about cap and grade and whether we hit the 17% maximum number of attached product inside of the project. We would really like to have the market rate. I think it would help the diversity of the project a little bit. So if it helps your decision-making process, we will remove them from the proposal.
Well, I'm not necessarily for or against. I just wondered what the thought was. So am I hearing that you're saying to avoid the cap and grade, you're making them senior housing?
Yes.
And that's the only reason?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I suspected, but I wanted
Yep.
to hear that from you. And the next question is, wouldn't it be easier to sell the units if amenities were there when people were buying in? And the same thing with
Absolutely.
Because I know you're talking about doing it later, doing it earlier instead.
That's why it's labeled 1A and 1B. They most likely will go concurrently. The issue is water. There's water available for about 40 units today. My client is at his own cost right now, going to build the water tank, which is about $8 million.
Tell him thank you. That's great.
So
we appreciate that.
it's a huge expense. Building the half width of 90 South is about $4 million. So before they even can build one home, they're into it about $13 million, which is a huge price tag. Now that's why they're asking for some concession from you. We're going to split phase 1 to phase 1A and 1B. If the water hookups do come quicker, they will be built concurrently, and we completely agree. No one wants to build a house on faith, right? You walk into your community and you have a sign there and says, future spot for Clubhouse. That we've seen that fizzle and disappear many times. That's not our intent. Our intent is to build those as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And overall, I like your project. I think it looks good. So thanks for the work you've done.
My question is for, Scott or Ray. You mentioned 6700 West, and there are a couple others here that stubbed to the north. Who's responsible for that stub? In other words, 6700 West, and that right now tees in about 85, 80 south or whatever that is, right where the houses are. Who's responsible for the distance between that and this? I mean, it's only like 100 feet or whatever it is, but is that the city's responsibility or is that on the developer?
I appreciate the question, actually. I was actually going to talk about 8600 South and those stubs that you're referring to that were not completed when the Oak subdivision was constructed. And maybe I can back up one step. And Mr. Haas talked about cap and grade versus senior housing market rate. Right now, the cap and grade requires, or the cap and grade allows 17% of a master plan community to be market rate in an effort to create a more balanced community, right? We made that amendment years ago. Well, as we've looked at the phasing, the cost of infrastructure, we've started to talk about the cost and the phasing of 8600. And there's the potential where this northern half of the Ochre Mountain Resort could be deferred or delayed. And in that case, the whole balance of 17% gets kind of thrown out of whack. It's either all or nothing, right? You either meet the code or you don't. Well, if they go senior housing, it's less of an issue with the balancing of that 17%. But that raises the question of the timing of 8600. Is it critical? Is it crucial for these first phases down to the south of the Wash to move forward? The development agreement that staff is working on right now with the developer is trying to wrangle that question, council member. And right now, there's different property owners that are one particular property owner that owns the northern half of that future right-of-way. And we're going to try to work out who pays for that section, who constructs that section. If the council has strong opinion either way, now would be a great time to hear that so that we can have some clarity as we draft that agreement. I know that our attorney's office, city management has been involved with this, and I think, you know, if they have any comments, they can jump in, but it would be wonderful if the council had a strong opinion one way or the other regarding the construction, the timing of construction for that road. Normally, before you jump in, normally, I'll tell you that when it comes to collector roads or arterial roads, if it is adjacent to your property, the code requires that proportionate share be developed by that developer. And there's potential for reimbursement and those types of things.
Yeah, and what I was mostly concerned about was actually not the part that's in the development here. That part's relatively clear, but the part that's not, if it's actually between this development and where the roads exist, like you mentioned, when the Oaks and the subdivision to the west of the Oaks, I don't remember what it's called there, the Ivory Homes there, are, you know, those stub streets were not put in to connect to where 8600 South will be. And right now, there's like a paved alleyway back there, sort of, that's gated off, but,
those details we will definitely address those.
So that's what I was curious about. And one other question that I had, just while I have the floor, was on the amenities, there's an amphitheater I see in there. How many people can that seat? Just out of curiosity. Totally unrelated to everything else that we just talked about.
To be right honest with you, I didn't count the benches, but
Can you ballpark?
probably 125,
Okay, I just ballpark, it's
somewhere there.
less than 250
Right.
and not nearly
It's not
6,000.
massive, right.
Gotcha, okay, thanks.
Zach wants to hold a concert. Zach wants to hold a concert there.
Probably.
I'm quite the singer.
So Scott, without the roads on 8600, then we have an entrance and exit, egress on 90th and one on 64. Am I seeing that right?
Correct. There'd be two, at least on this plan, it shows two off of 90th South.
Where's the second one?
Right
off of
here.
90th? Oh, down below, okay.
Yeah. And then one on the 64th.
And UDOT's okay with those, and our traffic engineers approve
Yeah,
those?
that is under the city's jurisdiction
Okay.
Currently.
Okay.
currently, yes.
But we are a political subdivision, so that could change.
One thing for sure, this northern section cannot move forward without 8600 South being built. That's a non-starter.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but they are responsible for the south half of 86, is that correct?
Their proportionate share would be that south half, yes. And anything above and beyond their share that needs to be constructed, then the city would need to participate in that.
So you're saying on the north side of 86, it's not, I'm just looking at the map, but it's, so the north side's done,
North side is not done.
No,
and, but the city would have to do the north side.
yes.
And why is that, why isn't the developer on the north side? I know you were just, I think, speaking about it, but did we forget something in an agreement?
That was done years ago. Jordan Hills Villages was done and negotiated, I think, back in 2000, 2001, that time frame. And so that was part of Mr. Deal's development.
Okay.
And that's the back of all those houses, none of them face that street.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing, that they don't face the street, but still. And, never mind, you answered that question. And will UDOT, I mean, if UDOT takes 90th South, they're okay with this, the ingress and egress, and there's two more over in the commercial space to get into the commercial space?
UDOT
But
hasn't
it's-
weighed in on any of that, any of the proposed points of ingress or egress on 90th because it's not their deal at this point.
Well, right, it's a city street, but I get worried a little bit because there's other places on 90th South, not here, that is UDOT owned, that are preventing us from having economic development because they won't allow an ingress.
To Redwood, I think from Redwood to I-15.
Yeah.
We've followed UDOT's access management standards for all of those ingress egresses. So even if it was a UDOT facility, we would comply.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, the purpose of bringing this to the council tonight is to get you an update, let you know that we're still very actively working on this development behind the scenes. We're close to the finish line, and that being the case, we wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to comment on any of these slight adjustments that the developer is proposing. Give you the forum to comment so that as we button up these agreements, we can do so and with some clarity that would address any concerns and also and I haven't given Mr. Hogan the chance to talk, but Mayor, if it'd be okay if he had anything to add.
I know Rob Wall's got a comment, so before he starts, let's see what Rob.
Hang on, can I just ask you one question? Do we anticipate the school being complete before anything's done here?
Absolutely, it's under construction. Now, the school meaning the elementary school?
Yes.
Correct, yeah.
Thanks.
And there is water for the school.
Rob, you had a comment there?
Yeah, I want to comment a little more on 8600 South. I don't think we're yet completely clear on what's happening there, and I don't want you to be misled or have an idea in your head of what is or is not going to happen. Scott, could you go back to that other slide that shows more blue?
The phasing?
Yeah, that one. 8600 South, right now, the way that the staff and the developer have talked, would come when, I guess it's phase 4 and phase 5 are built. And the thing that I think we need to ask the developer what his intentions are there, because you need to know what the timing of that is. Because if you're expecting it to be built tomorrow versus in 5 years, that's important. And in my experience, and I don't know it all, but I'm an old guy with gray hair that's done a lot of this, the biggest controversy that comes out in these PC zones is that their council expects to see something at the end of the day, and it doesn't happen. And that's why the mayor, when the applicant first came before you, had the staff make a list of everything you brought up and then gave the direction to staff to be working through those. And I just want to make sure that anything that you expected from that original list that's different now is pointed out to you. And that's one thing that's different, is that the timing of that road isn't going to be when the rest of this is built. And that's okay. And you need to know that, on the other hand, I'm not saying I like this proposal personally, but that's of no consequence. It's not my decision. And you can only exact out of the developer what his proportionate share is. Now, what a lot of cities do, if they decide that a road or a tank or whatever needs to be built, they'll come up with a funding mechanism and ask the developer to build it concurrent with the rest of the development, and then pay the developer back over time, because that infrastructure, whatever it is, will be beneficial to the city at the time the development's being built. That takes money, and I don't know that we have that money. So I'm not saying that we should require that now, because that's a financial decision, but I just want you to be clear on when that road may be built. The other issue I think that we need to clarify is that I think the staff we need to give you a little more background on where we're at on the financing of the tank, to make sure you understand that the developer's not paying for the whole thing. He's gonna fund it initially, but we're paying a lot of it back. And we're gonna do it through some mechanism that I'm not quite sure what it is. Scott may have some more comments on that, but I think we owe it to you for you to understand that also.
Well, let me ask a question
And maybe
too.
I'm being the bad guy and you guys can all shoot me after the meeting, but I just want you to be clear on
the timing and how this is all gonna roll out.
And maybe this is a question for David Murphy, because I know he would deal with this and has in the past. If this is approximately, let's just say it's 5 years down the road on the blue portion, the north portion, and they are going to build their half of the road, do we not put in our capital projects now to have a 5-year plan for that half of the road so that the money is coming forth at some point in time rather than just not do anything?
Simply speaking, yes. And right now in the capital projects listings, at the very far end of that 6-year plan, current year included, there would be room to fit a collector street like this into that plan. So we would just need to decide on that priority, make that a priority, and go ahead and budget forward that priority.
Didn't we have a similar situation on 5600 West that was just rebuilt from New Bingham going north, where the backs of the houses were all, we had a half road there for a long time. Wasn't it the same similar situation?
It's very similar what we just built between 62 and 70th, where we did a street removal. It's also very similar to what we just did on 78th to 8600 South, where we are up against the backs of homes, yes.
So we can put this in a say, a 5-year plan, 6-year plan, to work with the developer to build it at the same time, perhaps, that he's building his half?
And if that scheduling and priority does work out, yes, we could. It's a matter of making sure that the cash flow is also there. So based on our maintenance needs on the roads.
Understood. Thank you.
Can I get a little clarification on the water tank? So I understand that we're paying it back, but are we paying this back, would we be paying this back with an interest, or are we just paying back the costs?
I don't know the details on that one, Kayleen. I haven't been working on it. I can tell you what the law says, and that is you have the decision-making authority to say to the developer, we're not going to approve this development unless you build the tank now because we need it. But you can only require the developer to pay for a portion. You can make them build it with a reimbursement agreement, which is what we're doing. Now, the mechanism for that, that's something I haven't been involved in those discussions. I think maybe Scott can address that and David a little more.
There's a couple of answers to that. Right now, with the size of the development, they have their water impact fees that they're going to pay, and or those water impact fees can offset the cost of the tank project and the booster station and the transmission line project. Project total cost is about $8.5 million. Impact fees will offset somewhere around the $2.5 to $2.7 million range. The rest of that amount needs to be repaid by the city to the developer through some sort of reimbursement mechanism that's usually paid by impact fees or water rates. In this case, it's generally going to be impact fees over time and or a bond that we take down at a certain time to repay the final amount. So it's those mechanisms inclusive to repay the developer.
So if it's impact fees, then there isn't an interest rate, but if we go after a bond to repay it, then there will be.
Exactly.
Correct.
And impact fees can still repay interest as well as part of the impact fee calculations that the city goes through every couple of years.
Okay. So I would need to know that before I'm asked to say yes or no on that.
Let me add a little clarity to that. There is an obligation if the developer fronts the money that we do have to consider paying interest for that money he fronts. We can't just say you have to pay it all and we're going to pay you back in 2025 with $2019. We can't do that. Whether it's a bond or through reimbursement over time, there has to be an interest component.
But I just want to be clear, we didn't say you have to do this. We said the property can't be developed until there's a water tank, and we don't have plans to do that yet.
That's still to be decided by you. Now, let me tell you too that, because I don't want to be the naysayer, I'm not saying that at all. This is the kind of developer we want, somebody who's willing to have these discussions with you.
And I have to hand that to them, and they're willing to step up and do some pretty significant things. But there's only a certain amount that we can expect them to pay without running afoul of the law.
This whole process, I think, has been very favorably received by city council. So it's been good.
Mayor, before I forget, I think 2 months ago, maybe it was in March, I emailed the council the list that Mr. Wall was talking about, some of the questions and concerns that came out in those initial discussions. I'm going to tomorrow send out a new list, a refreshed list. It's going to be fairly similar to what you saw several months ago, and give you another opportunity to, before we button things up completely with our development agreement, give you the opportunity to go through that, see if we've covered all of the bases, and that'll really be beneficial to staff as we work on the development plan and development agreement. So just a heads up.
Mayor and council, I appreciate the time. And I appreciate the time that you've spent with this project over in the past. And I really appreciate staff. They have been really great to work with. They've held meetings with us every 2 weeks for the last couple of months, trying to work out little details, and especially working on the developers agreement where it encompasses the 90th South and the water tank. As Greg mentioned, this is probably the heaviest front-loaded financial cost I've ever had on a project, with almost $13 million between 90th South and the water tank. But we're really proud of this project. We think this is something that really will be a star, a gem in West Jordan. We feel like that we can work the developers agreement out in a short period of time. As Scott indicated, we're very close. We would like to get on the agenda as soon as possible with the city council for a vote. I think all the public hearings are over with, so we'd like to hopefully get the developers agreement finished and get on the city council agenda as possible, because a developer time is money, and especially going into the good part of the season when we could get construction going. And but I just want to thank you so much for your time and effort over the last year. Thank you.
We'll be looking forward to seeing that agreement. Scott, anything else on this?
I'm just wondering, following up on Mr. Wall's comment or question, I don't know if Kent is willing to talk about his intentions regarding 8600 or that northern phase.
I think the timing's close to what has just been proposed, and that is I think somewhere in the next 4 to 5 years is when we would be developing that north piece, which would be coincide with the time that 8600 would need to be completed. We realize that that has to be completed before we could actually start construction on phase 4 and 5, and we go into this understanding that.
That's why I wanted to make sure that we were planning as well to put that into our capital improvement plan.
If I can just add, this is the great thing about putting processes and systems in place and having 5-year plans so that we can do water tanks and roads and planned communities like this. This excites me that we're thinking ahead.
I'm sorry, Mayor, one last thing. It would really be helpful to the staff if we got I know you're not making any formal votes tonight, but generally, is the council comfortable with this revised phasing plan?
I haven't heard anything to the contrary, but I think to see your list that you're going to send out tomorrow would be helpful as well.
Okay. And on that list that we send out tomorrow, we'll also ask you to weigh in on the level of comfort regarding 8600 and the details regarding that road.
Could you send it to David and let David send it to us, and we can respond back to David?
Absolutely.
One question, something you just said, hit a chord. We said there's enough water currently for 40 units, approximately. After that, we have to have all the water for all of it, or is it, in other words, once we get past 40 units, is there going to be a day when there's enough water for 65 units? or 80 units? Or is it just the switch gets flipped and the new tank is on and we get water for all the units?
All or nothing.
It's, that's what I kind of figured it was. So considering that Phase 1A has more than 40 units in it, and the trigger to whether we can build Phase 1A and B at the same time is the water availability, which part of Phase 1A is actually Phase 1A? And where's that gonna stop if the water's not put in? Does that make sense? Because this Phase 1A, you can't build that whole thing if you don't have the water, and if you do have the water, there's no reason you can't build 1B at the same time.
That's a great question, Councilman. I'll let the developer field that, but my guess is the developer is going around and seeing if he can acquire pre-existing water entitlements from other developers, which might buy him enough to start 1A.
Gotcha. So infrastructure-wise, for us, it's all or nothing, but for you, there may be another source.
That's correct. In the last few weeks, we've been talking to several other developers. There's about 420 hookups that are not presently being used. And in talking to these other developers, maybe 150 of those are going to be used in the next 12 to 18 months, which leaves a couple of hundred available. For an example, we are in negotiations right now with Homes on about 150 hookup units. And then with Peterson's and a couple of others, maybe another 50. And we've got some very positive feedback from them so far. We're hoping that we can pick those units up, which would mean that 1A and 1B would just be built
Okay,
consecutive.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Is that it, Scott? Thank you, and thank you, folks, for being here tonight and being part of this. So we'll now move to item 10, remarks. 2 minutes per person. And Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. After a quick conversation with our good city manager, I need to clarify, for anybody who didn't catch all of my comments at the start of the meeting, I did talking about our clerk who retired. When I mentioned that she wasn't here today, there was some concern. She is retired, she is doing well. Hopefully she's on a beach somewhere, but yeah, it was a retirement that it was being discussed. So hopefully nobody listening took that the wrong way. I understand there were some folks in the audience who may have, so thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
And I want to also express my appreciation for the work that she has done for, I don't know how many years. She's always the one I came to before I was on the council to get information. She knew everything and it seemed like she did everything, and she is going to be missed. I want to just say thank you to Melanie for your service you've done for West Jordan for 30 years, 33 years. Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
I thought we were going down, so I apologize, I jumped in. But I too, I didn't bring it up during the remarks as Councilmember McConaughey did, because she's been a fixture over there. And we've had Jamie and Tangi filling in at times this year. I've known Melanie for a very long time, even before I was a resident of West Jordan, and found her to be extremely welcoming and extremely knowledgeable. And I'm excited for her to retire and to experience that realm. Somebody once told me that when you retire, you have all the money and all the time. So I'm looking forward to retirement someday myself. But Melanie will truly be missed in the city. She's a wealth of knowledge, and I'm proud to be able to call her a friend. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I don't know that I'd bank on that, all the money and all the time. Sometimes you have money, sometimes you have time. You don't always have both. I appreciate Melanie's friendship, and I'm grateful that she is going to wear a tiara soon. Those who know will know.
Seeing no more remarks, I will entertain a motion for a closed session. Councilmember Burton.
So I move that we go into closed session for the discussion of the character and professional competence or physical or mental health of an individual, strategy session to discuss the pending reasonably intimate litigation, strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, including any form of water right or water shares.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Burton, a second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion of the motion. Councilmember McConaughey.
I didn't catch all that. Could our clerk read that back?
Oh, I didn't hear you either.
Did I say second? Who said second? Was that me? I'm sorry.
No, I did miss some. Could you read that back?
You're allowed to say no to him if you want to.
He's just giving me a hard time.
But what did you say? What was the motion?
To adjourn from the closed session.
No time certain or?
Okay, any further discussion of that motion?
Now, is this, it's 2/3 or is it majority, 2/3?
I assume that's a question for the clerk?
Yes.
Okay,
Deputy, the interim clerk, actually.
let us
Let's
vote.
get them both.
That's a question for the interim clerk.
Let us vote.
Councilmember McConaughey.
It really helped to have that whole motion read back verbatim. I'm a little unsure, but I'll say aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Burton.
Aye.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Aye.
Mayor Reding.
Yes?
Councilmember Jacob.
Welcome. And yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
You've done a fine job,
Thank you.
and I just want to make sure that we're closed session, then adjourning.
Yes.
Then I will say yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.
You have to give Chris a little leeway there, 'cause